Welcome back. This is the 35th segment of our 63 segment series, Because It's True, making the case for Christianity in bite-sized pieces. Now, interestingly enough, people who investigate the credibility of the Christian faith's claim that Jesus was raised from the dead very often, most often, overlook what may be the most significant piece of evidence that that claim is in fact true. And here's what I'm talking about. There is a very notable feature found in all four resurrection accounts in the New Testament, and that is that the resurrection announcement is made first to the women who followed Jesus. Now, there have been a number of explanations offered as to why this is the case. For example, it's been suggested that given the fact that it was the women who stayed with Jesus through the crucifixion, that something as a reward, they were allowed to be the first witnesses to his resurrection. Another suggestion has to do with the fact that it was women who traditionally carried out the burial rituals within Judaism, so that they would have been the first witnesses by default. Then another suggestion is that the first women witnesses represents Jesus's elevation of the status of women in the first century, and of all women in general. Now, as plausible as these explanations may be, there is another strategic reason as to why women were the first witnesses. So strategic, in fact, that it has been argued that this is the primary defense for the reality of the resurrection of Jesus. And here's the scoop. In that day and time, women in the first century were not considered credible witnesses. Indeed, no man in his right mind was going to give credence to a woman's testimony in the first century. They were not allowed to give testimony. Nothing that they would say would be admissible in a court of law. They were not consulted or asked to give witness about anything of any matter, any subject, any issue. So then why did the gospel writers report them as witnesses to what is in fact the central claim of the gospel? I mean, if women were not considered credible witnesses, why tell a story in which the women were the first witnesses? Wouldn't it have made more sense to offer some credible male testimony? Well, to that question, John Polkinghorne, who is an Anglican priest and, by the way, a quantum physicist, responds with a resounding no when he writes this. Perhaps the strongest reason of taking the stories of the empty tomb absolutely seriously lies in the fact that it is women who play the leading role. It would have been very unlikely for anyone in the ancient world who was concocting a story to assign the principal part to women, since in those times they were not considered capable of being reliable witnesses in a court of law. It is surely much more probable that they appear in the gospel accounts precisely because they actually fulfilled the role that these stories assigned to them. And in doing so, they make, and I would add, and so do we, a startling discovery. So, in this sense, women offer what may very well be the strongest defense for the witness of the gospel writers. It is the very fact that women were not considered reliable witnesses that ironically make these accounts credible. For who would make up a story like this? I mean, the story of Jesus with women as the central characters in its very dramatic conclusion.